Hi everyone, and welcome to the video on external environments and the macro environment in particular. So, the theory related to external environments and the macro environment holds that essentially there are forces outside the firm that it does not control that shape whether or not the firm will be successful. So let's say that you're starting up a new firm, right? The only thing that you need to do to be successful is to find the right kind of environment. And if you can find the right kind of external environment, then you can thrive. So in terms of making profit, what this says is that if you can find a favorable external environment, then everybody in that environment can make money. There are flaws with that theory, as you'll hear about later, but some of them work, right? And so we're going to use Nordstrom as an example. And Nordstrom has been facing a wildly unfriendly external environment, right? But when we talk about the external environment, we're never talking just about one firm, because when you think about this theory of success, what it essentially says is that everybody can make money if they find the right kind of external environment. So it really doesn't matter who the individual player is. So for the purposes of talking about the external environment, we're never talking just about one firm. This can be confusing when you put it into practice because you're almost always trying to analyze one firm, and you're pairing up the external environment with details that you know about the internal environment. And you guys are going to do that in this class in a little while. But for right now, all we're thinking about is the world outside the firm. We're not going to talk about anything that the firm does or has that's inside it that makes it special or unique. We're mostly focusing on the idea of the world in which the firms are nested, right? So when you think about somebody as big as Nordstrom, whether you've interacted with them or not, they sit inside an industry and they have partners in that industry. So some of them that you might know are Macy's, JCPenney, for reasons I do not understand. Sears is still one of them, although for, even a decade now, they've been circling the drain and on my watch list for the next firms to go under. A lot of the reason for that is what we're going to talk about in this video. A lot of the reason for why Sears looks like it's circling the drain are the same kinds of things that are affecting Macy's, Nordstrom, and JCPenney, because they all operate inside the same external environment. So we go from then this smaller view of the one firm to looking at the industry as a whole. And here I've just listed out 4 firms, although there are many, many others inside their industry, even if you call their industry department stores before you even got into like clothing retail or home goods retailing, which is a much, much, much larger industry. You're looking at a lot of players nested inside this one group. And that one group is really kind of the smallest we're going to get, because the next form of analysis that we're going to look at is the industries that interact with this industry that change the way that the focal industry, or this group in the circle, is going to be able to operate. And we call that group, it should look familiar to you, right? The tool that we use to analyze this group is the 5 forces tool. So it's comprised of the suppliers, the buyers, the new entrants, the substitutes, the rivals. And we'll talk a lot more about that competitive environment. For this video, we're actually focusing even larger than that. We're focusing on the societal or population level trends that affect the competitive environment. Right? So I tend to call this the macro-environmental donut for reasons that you're going to see in a second. But this macro-environmental donut consists of trends or things that change for an entire population, right? Or for the entire world. It just so happens that those changes also affect business inside the competitive environment, and therefore inside the industry, and technically therefore for each firm, right? But the firm itself is such a small portion of what it is that we're analyzing, because we're talking at the macro environment level about things that are so incredibly large, right? And we call those the pestle forces. The exact things that are comprised inside each of these areas or each of these forces, political, economic, sociocultural, technological, environmental, and legal, what's comprised inside each of those is listed out in your book in a really nice way. But for the most part, they just use these areas as a way to be able to create this acronym, this pestle forces kind of a thing, so that you remember that there are forces that happen politically, legally, economically, so on and so forth, that impact firms. What happens and how they're all designated up, it doesn't really matter so much, right? I mean, what happens in the political world often influences the legal world and vice versa. So it's not so much a question of what's happening or which one belongs inside which force. The thing you want to remember is that these forces act on the industries that are nested way down inside them, right? Because they act on the competitive environments, and competitive environments are comprised of lots of different industries that interact. So when you find a force or a trend that's changing inside, for example, the environmental area, it's not that Nordstrom will have an effect, right? Or that Nordstrom will have, that it will affect Nordstrom. The way you want to think of it is that it affects the entire department store industry because it affects all industries. But the thing that's really interesting at this very, very high or large level in the macro environment is that all of these trends are affecting all industries, right? Sometimes it affects them in a good way, and sometimes it affects them in a bad way. There are occasions wherein it affects firms it affects industries in such a small way that it gets overlooked in favor of those trends that are going to affect it in a much, much, much bigger way. But that doesn't mean that those original trends aren't affecting them. They do. They just aren't trends that need to be immediately responded to at the moment. So let me give you an example of what I mean. When we talk about pestle level forces, we are talking about trends that change slowly over time, right? And that's really important because when you're designing strategy or you're coming up with a response, you need to know what's going to happen in the future so that you can come up with an understanding of how you want to respond. The past data is important, but if you come up with a response or an action for your firm to respond to a trend line and you only look at what happened before, then you're going to fail your firm, right? Because what you need to know is what's going to happen in the future, right? Or what the best guess is for what's going to happen in the future. Because it's the future part of this where you're going to make or lose money. And the way you want to think about that, right, is that these trend lines, the important part of these trend lines is knowing which direction they're headed in, because that creates either the opportunity or the threat. The difference between the line and the level that you are at currently is going to determine an opportunity or a threat. Now, this might be slightly different for you than the way that you've thought about opportunities and threats before, because often when you're working on SWOT analyses, the word opportunity as a vocabulary word often means Nordstrom has the opportunity to do something cool here, or Nordstrom has the opportunity to protect itself from something else. And that's true. That is how the word opportunity works. But in strategy class, opportunity is a word that refers to this trend line, right? And opportunity means very, very specifically, if the industry rivals stay exactly the way they are now, right? So if everybody inside that department store industry stays the way it is, and the line does continue to go the way that it's predicted, then the rivals will make money. That's an opportunity, right? And you'll note that nowhere in here did I say Nordstrom, right? It's industry rivals, because this line is the same for Nordstrom as it is for Macy's, as it is for JCPenney's, as it is for Sears even. It's just that those firms will come up with different actions. Maybe even you could say different options, but not different opportunities. They'll come up with these same opportunities, and then they'll create different responses to them. So firms have actions. Societies have opportunities, right? This is the trend line that's happening to all people everywhere is the one that is going to create an opportunity or a threat. And keep in mind that opportunity means if the industry rivals stay exactly as they are now and the line goes the way that it's predicted to go, then all the rivals in that industry will make money. So let's take a look at this particular line, right? The one that we're talking about here is the percentage of business conducted online. It is a really pretty fun trend line to talk about because it just goes straight up and to the right. And that's the kind of line that you love to see when you're looking at a growth chart or a stock chart or something like that. Here, it doesn't make so much difference because this line is going to represent an opportunity for some firms, an opportunity for some industries, and a threat for other industries. Right? So if you take a look at the opportunity, we can talk about some of the firms that this would represent an opportunity for, some of the industries that would interpret this line as an opportunity. Obviously, streaming entertainment, right? Because the more business gets conducted online, the more these streaming services the more these streaming services have an opportunity to make money. And what that means is if they stay exactly the way they are, right? If all of the rivals in the industry did nothing else from this moment on, if Netflix and Disney Plus and Hulu added no other TV shows, if they lost no TV shows, if they stayed exactly as they are right now, by the way, all of them, right? If they just got frozen in some kind of weird moment in time, like Brigadoon, and emerged from the mist 100 years from now, and that line continues to go up, meaning more and more business gets conducted online, then those firms will have made money. That's what an opportunity means, right? Now, obviously, all firms are going to create actions in response to the trend line. They're going to interpret that opportunity to make money, and they're going to make changes to their firm so that they make more money, right? Another example of an industry that's going to make money off of this is online tutoring, because obviously as more business gets conducted online, as more services are taken online, online tutoring is going to be popular. And this doesn't even take into account that little bump that you see in the line there that represents coronavirus, right? Or the quarantine period of time, which does affect this line and the projection that analysts see into the future. So it's taken that very unexpected and strange moment in time into account in the trend line that it's drawn, right? Data recovery services are likely to do very well for themselves, right? So let's say the entire industry stays exactly as it is right now and everybody continues to recover data the way that they do, and nobody makes any changes, but everybody continues to do more and more and more business online. It hopefully makes sense to you why it is that data recovery organizations would make more and more money over time. And then, of course, social networking sites. They're going to interpret this line as an opportunity to make money because if they stay exactly as they are and we keep doing business online, then more and more advertising money is coming their way. More and more users are coming their way. And so the opportunity is there for them to make more money, even if they do nothing to change at all. And of course, all of them will. Nobody will get frozen in time. But that's what an opportunity is. An opportunity means if everybody stays frozen in time right here in the industry, and the line continues to go in the direction it's expected to go in, here up and to the right, then the rivals inside each of these four industries will make money. But even without changing anything about that line at all, right? It's still going to go up and to the right. There's still going to be more and more business being conducted online. That line will also represent a threat to some industries, because a threat means if the industry rivals stay exactly the way they are now, and the line continues to go in the direction that is predicted, in this case up and to the right, then the rivals will lose money. So an example of that would be the Postal Service, right? The more business we conduct online, the less business we do through the mail. And so the Postal Service is looking at this line that is up and to the right, that social networking is looking at, and just drooling over all the money, the DuckTales money that they're going to make as they swim around in their giant water towers full of gold coins. The Postal Service is looking at that and they're worried. Obviously, they also have much bigger worries, but in terms of this line, right, this line also represents a threat to them. Bridal stores are going to similarly interpret this as a threat because the more business that gets conducted online, the less face-to-face service will matter. And the more, if you called this this particular trend line part of the sociocultural environment or sector of the environment, then part of what you're saying is that customers are getting used to the idea that they would buy their dresses online as opposed to going to a bridal store to have that entire experience of dressing and trying on multiple and pirouetting on the stands and all the rest of it. And so if you're a bridal store and you're looking at this line, you are interpreting, if we all stay exactly as we are right now and that line continues to go up and to the right, then we're going to lose a lot of money. And so a lot of the rivals inside this industry will take steps to make sure that that doesn't happen to them, right? They'll take action in their strategy to make sure that they don't lose money. And which actions they take depends on a lot of other factors. But for right now, what's important to know is that this line represents a threat to them. Paper wholesalers, those of you who are fans of The Office, right? This line is the reason that firm was going out of business the entire time the show was on the air. It's this right here, right? The more we do business by email, the more we do business with DocuSign or DocuServe, and the less we mail paper back and forth, the less money paper wholesalers will make. And I certainly don't like any world that puts Dunder Mifflin. Oh man, I can't remember the name of the firm anymore. I can't believe that. I loved that show. Anyway, the more that firm and its rivals are threatened, right? And the more they need to take steps to protect themselves from that threat. And then, of course, the reason that we bring this up is because department stores are hugely affected by this line as well. The more we do business online, the more we purchase online, e-commerce and m-commerce that are driving this upward trend, right? The less we go to department stores for full service fitting or shoe fittings where you sit down and you work with a salesperson or even going to the restaurants at Nordstrom, which are all service-based experiences, right? All of those things, the goods that you purchase, the goods that you went to the department stores to purchase, and then you also went and got a snack in the restaurant or you met with a fitting person, all those experiences that you might have incorporated into it, that you might have spent more money with Nordstrom because of, or any of its rivals, you are much less likely to do if you're just going to Amazon to buy your clothes, right? And so that line represents a huge threat to the department stores. So in summary then, there are four key facts, four things that you're going to want to remember about the macro environment in particular. The first is that pestle level trends are affecting all industries and therefore all firms all the time, right? It's just that they affect some of them positively, some industries positively, and some industries negatively. And the reason that this happens is because pestle trends happen at the population level, right? So that percentage of business that's getting conducted online, that happens because all people are conducting more business online over time, right? It happens because society is conducting more business over time. The entire population of the United States is conducting more business over time. And so that means that it affects those 8 industries and all the others in different kinds of ways, right? That they have to create different strategies to deal with. The third thing is that pestle trends go up or down over time. This is, in fact, maybe the most important thing to remember entirely, is that an opportunity or a threat really just comes from the difference between where you are right now and where that line is going, right? So if that line is going up, then all this area in here is going to represent possible money that you could be making if this is an opportunity for your industry. All that area in here, if this is a threat, all that money in this bottom area between where you are right now and where the line is headed, that all represents lost money or lost profits, right? So it's the fact that something is increasing over time, like an increasing amount of business being conducted online, or decreasing over time, that makes the difference. It's not the trend line itself. So the fourth thing is that pestle level trends are not single events, right? So 9/11 was a hugely disruptive event, but 9/11 by itself is not a pestle trend, right? Because a trend has to change slowly over time. That's why we design strategy to respond to it, because it goes slowly up in a predicted kind of a way or slowly down in a predicted kind of a way. And one single level event isn't going to change that, even something as big and disruptive as 9/11. Now, to the extent that 9/11 was indicative of an increasing number of terrorist attacks or an increasing awareness of national level threats to security, then that increasing thing is possible. That increasing line it is possible that it may have been a pestle level trend where you can find data to back that up, right? That it is going slowly in one direction or another over time. But it's not a single event. That goes in a different category, right? The kinds of changes that happen to firms because of these disruptive events. We usually call those environmental jolts, right? They definitely do affect firms, but they're much harder to plan for. They're much harder to design strategy for. Not that you don't have a binder for a hurricane or even a binder for a terrorist attack, a binder for a pandemic. But you design and execute strategy in response to pestle level trends because they're moving slowly in predictable fashion over time. So that makes these the 4 key facts that you're going to want to remember about the macro environment. Thank you for watching.